Let's bring in CNN's Clarissa Ward, who is in Kabul. Clarissa, there seem to be conflicting reports here about whether those trying to evacuate Afghanistan can even get into, much less get to, the airport in Kabul.
Yeah, I would say, Jake, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, we went today, we saw for ourselves absolute chaos, frankly, and there were far fewer people trying to get into the airport today than there have been on previous days. But it doesn't matter, because the system, or complete lack of system, is creating a situation whereby you have these Taliban fighters who are beating at people, who are shooting into the crowds. The U.S. also today was forced to fire shots to disperse crowds, not into the crowds, though, not actually hurting people, but all of this creating a very chaotic and dangerous situation. Take a look.
America's last foothold in Afghanistan is now guarded by the Taliban.
Yeah, see, the Taliban are all over. They don't allow anyone.
We've come to Kabul's airport to see the gauntlet people must pass through to fly out.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes.
CNN.
Quickly, we are accosted by an angry Taliban fighter.
Can I ask you a question? Excuse me?
He says first.
Cover my face? Okay. Cover my face. What is this? What is that? He told me to cover my face, but he doesn't want to comment on that truncheon he's carrying.
The fighter tells us these chaotic scenes are the fault of America. The cause of all this is America in Afghanistan. Look at these people, he says. America's really acting unfairly towards them. Why are they lying and telling them that they can go to America? Why don't they let them stay and help their country?
Okay.
Doesn't want to talk to you.
Okay. Doesn't want to talk to you. That's fine. All right.
We keep walking to avoid confrontation. A man follows us, asking for advice.
How we can enter the base?
How you can enter the base?
Yes. Because they are sending me email also.
Do you have paperwork to enter?
Yes.
Show me
The
your
enter,
paperwork.
no. But we have email and they calling me.
Is this an Italian company?
Yeah, Italian company. Herat.
Okay, I don't want this guy to whip you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Others crowd around us to show their documents.
Camp Phoenix. You work at Camp Phoenix.
It's my HR letter.
Yeah. You were a translator?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, can you see this? What
Camp
we are
Invicta.
doing?
So they're saying they all worked at American camps as translators for the Americans, and they can't get into that airport. These Taliban fighters are a little upset with us, so let's keep going.
We decide to leave and head for our car. The fighter takes the safety off his AK-47 and pushes through the crowd.
Stay behind him. Stay behind him.
You can see that some of these Taliban fighters, they're just hopped up on adrenaline, or I don't know what. It's a very dicey situation.
Suddenly, two other Taliban charge towards us. You can see their rifle butt raised to strike producer Brent Swales. When the fighters are told we have permission to report, they lower their weapons and let us pass.
Okay, now we're going. Get in the car. And you can imagine, Jake, I mean, this is us. We are a news crew. We are clearly Western. And still, we were exposed to all sorts of insanity. If you're an ordinary Afghan trying to get past those Taliban guards and trying to get in to the airport, I mean, I don't see how you're able to do it. I don't see how you're able to really get in unless you have some kind of a contact or a connection, or you're able to arrange something somehow. But as I said, the infrastructure simply isn't in place to even begin to do that. So as a result, you have all these poor people sitting outside the airport for days on end now, and it's their last hope. But frankly, Jake, there's no real hope.
It's so tragic. Let me ask you, when it comes to the American military presence there at the airport, they've recaptured the airport, it's secure, they say. Is there any rhyme or reason at the airport? Americans go here, Afghan SIVs with documentation go there, other Afghans go to a third location. President Biden said they planned for every contingency.
Well, I can only speak to the outer perimeter, and there is definitely no planning. There is definitely no coherent structure. When we were first trying to push closer to the airport, the Taliban originally thought that we were trying to leave the country. And so then they were sort of like, okay, yeah, you're Western, fine, you can leave the country. And they started trying to guide us further in. But meanwhile, there's gunshots being fired, there's people wielding truncheons. I mean, it was not a comfortable situation to be in. Of course, ultimately, we were not trying to actually get into the airport. But certainly, it wasn't a coherent system, right? It wasn't like, oh, yes, please step right this way. Americans are supposed to line up over there and Afghans go here, and this is where you present your paperwork. It's just completely chaotic.
And I want to get your reaction to something said by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, today. He said that they had no indication that an army the size of the Afghan army, which I think was estimated in the hundreds of thousands, no indication that it would collapse in 11 days. As somebody who has covered this war now for a long time, what do you think?
I think, listen, to be fair, Jake, no one ever thought that this whole thing would unravel in a matter of days. No one thought that the Taliban would be able to take Kabul, a city of 6 million people, in a matter of hours while barely firing a shot. I mean, if you had written this in a movie script, people would have said it was over the top. It really does beggar belief, and that's why this is clearly a seismic, historic moment that we're witnessing. At the same time, a lot of people on the ground here would say, well, it's your responsibility still, when you are leaving a country that you've been occupying for 20 years, to plan for every possible eventuality, including the sublime and the ridiculous, on the very small chance that they happen to come to fruition.
The Taliban leadership have gotten more sophisticated in the last 20 years in terms of the propaganda, the rhetoric they use, the promises they make when giving press conferences and the like. There are a lot of foreign officials, even officials in the U.S. who are eager to hear that. But I wonder, you and your team were accosted in Kabul. You were told to cover your face, which is medieval. And I'm wondering, is that the norm in Kabul? And if so, what's it like in Kandahar?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a really important point because we're zeroing in on the airport right now, and rightly so, because these scenes are tragic and awful. But that's just a very small part of the city. And if you walk around the rest of the city, I have to say, Jake, and we've been doing it a lot, it is relatively calm at the moment. People are coming back out onto the streets. Stores are opening. There is some semblance of law and order. You don't see that kind of anarchic scene that you saw in our story there. This is very much specific to the airport, but it really speaks to this moment, right? The Taliban, for them, this is shameful. These images of thousands of people desperately trying to leave the country so they can avoid living under their rule, that's humiliating for the Taliban. And so you have this very bizarre dynamic where the Taliban and the U.S. are kind of working together because the Taliban wants everyone who needs to leave, Westerners primarily. The U.S. needs the Taliban to provide some protection on the outer perimeter, but essentially there's a huge amount of tension just in the very coexistence of these two parties at such close proximity, Jake.